You think you're actually going to fly that thing? The Griffin HX-9 isn't for mechanics. An officer burst out laughing across the tarmac as a young woman approached the base's most advanced helicopter. She didn't respond, just started the engine, in complete silence. When the Griffin HX-9 returned 47 minutes later, a general was waiting. He stepped forward, removed his cap, and saluted. "Greetings, Pilot 17, the person I once owed my life to." Lieutenant Casey Min was 29 years old, half Vietnamese, and completely invisible to everyone who mattered. She'd graduated summa cum laude from the United States Air Force Academy, scored perfect marks on every flight simulation, memorized every emergency protocol in the manual, mastered aerial combat maneuvers that made seasoned instructors shake their heads in amazement. But here at Granite Ridge Air Base in Colorado, she was just a mechanic who thinks she can fly. The Griffin HX-9 helicopters were the absolute crown jewels of the military fleet. Sleek carbon fiber bodies, twin turboshaft engines capable of reaching 200 miles per hour, advanced avionics systems that cost more than most people's houses. These machines were precision instruments of rescue and warfare. Only 16 pilots in the entire United States military were authorized to fly them, each one hand-selected, each one extensively trained, each one carrying years of combat experience. All 16 were men. Casey spent her days with motor oil staining her uniform, hydraulic fluid under her fingernails, maintaining the very machines she'd spent 4 years training to pilot. The other officers had a nickname for her: better at fixing than flying. They'd say it loud enough for her to hear. They'd laugh when she walked past the flight roster. They'd make jokes about grease monkeys who dream of wings. They had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. 7 years ago, Casey's father, Lieutenant Colonel Hui Min, had died in what the official report called a coordination error during a high-risk extraction mission. Bad intelligence, wrong coordinates, faulty communication protocols. Her father had followed orders from the very general who now commanded this base. Casey's flight certification had been indefinitely postponed after that incident, not because she lacked skill, not because she failed any tests, but because military bureaucracy has a long memory, and family tragedy casts shadows that last for years. She'd been grounded before she'd ever really flown. This Tuesday morning in November started exactly like every other morning for the past 7 years. Routine maintenance checks on 3 Griffin HX-9 units, equipment inventory for the helicopter squadron, parts requisition forms, the usual invisibility that came with being support staff instead of flight crew. Then the emergency alarm screamed across the entire base: Code Red, Flood Rescue Mission, Grid Sector 6 Bravo, for soldiers trapped in rising water, immediate deployment required. The duty roster scrambled into chaos, officers running between buildings, radio chatter crackling with urgent voices, time bleeding away like water through broken fingers. Pilot 17 was down with a compound fracture in his right wrist. Pilot 8 was on leave. Pilot 3 was grounded pending a medical review. No backup pilot was qualified for Griffin HX-9 emergency rescue operations. Casey watched the panic unfold from the maintenance bay, oil-stained hands gripping a wrench, heart pounding with the knowledge that 4 soldiers were going to die unless someone acted. She walked to Griffin HX-9 tail number 77 Alpha, pulled on her leather flight gloves, and climbed into the pilot's seat she'd been dreaming about for 7 years. If you've ever been judged by your job title instead of your actual talent, drop a heart below. You might be far more capable than they realize. Casey's fingers moved across the control panel with the precision of a concert pianist, pre-flight checklists memorized from countless hours of dreaming, 8 power indicators glowing green, hydraulic pressure nominal, fuel tanks full, weather conditions marginal but flyable. She keyed the radio with steady hands. "Tower, this is Griffin HX-9 tail 77 Alpha. Ready for immediate emergency departure to Grid 6 Bravo." The response crackled back immediately. "Negative. Who is this?" "Pilot 17 is not cleared for duty. This is Lieutenant Casey, Minnesota. I am qualified and ready for rescue operations." A different voice cut in, sharp, authoritative, panicked, absolutely negative. "You are not authorized for combat search and rescue. Return to maintenance duties immediately." But Casey was already lifting off. The Griffin HX-9 rose from the concrete like a mechanical angel, its twin rotors cutting through the cold Colorado air with the whisper-smooth precision of German engineering. Below her, she could see officers pouring out of buildings, pointing up at her, shouting into radios, watching a mechanic fly their most advanced aircraft with the fluid grace of someone born to pilot. In the tower, absolute chaos erupted. Who the hell authorized this flight? She's maintenance crew, not flight crew. Get the base commander on the radio. Scramble another aircraft to intercept. But Casey was already disappearing into the storm clouds, gathering over the Rocky Mountains. At that exact moment, as if summoned by fate itself, a black government sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the main gate of Granite Ridge Air Base. General Bernard Blake stepped out into the cold November air, silver-haired at 58, steel-gray eyes that had seen combat in 3 different wars. 28 years of military command carved into the lines of his weathered face. He'd flown in unannounced from the Pentagon for what his aide had called a routine inspection. There was nothing routine about what General Blake was really here to do. He looked up just in time to see the Griffin HX-9 disappearing into the distance. "What helicopter is that?" he asked the duty officer who'd rushed out to greet him. "Unauthorized flight, sir," the young lieutenant stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "We're attempting to recall the aircraft immediately." "Who's flying it?" "Casey Min, sir." "She's not supposed to be flying. She's maintenance personnel." General Blake stopped walking. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. "Did you say Min? Casey Min?" "Yes, sir. Lieutenant Casey, Minnesota." Is there a problem, sir?" Blake stared at the empty sky where the helicopter had vanished. His hands began to tremble slightly. "Is she related to Lieutenant Colonel Hai Min?" The duty officer checked his tablet quickly. "According to her personnel file, yes, sir. Hui Min was listed as her father." 7 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Hai Min had saved General Blake's life. It had been a disaster from the beginning. Bad intelligence from an unreliable source. Wrong coordinates radioed to a convoy moving through hostile territory. Blake's armored vehicle had been ambushed by enemy forces with rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons. Hui Min had been ordered to maintain his position, ordered to wait for backup, ordered to follow protocol. Instead, he'd taken his helicopter directly into enemy fire, landed under a hail of bullets, and pulled Blake out of certain death. 2 weeks later, Hui Min was dead, killed following the same type of flawed intelligence that nearly cost Blake his life. Blake had tried to protect Hai's daughter afterward, tried to ensure she received fair treatment and proper opportunities. But military bureaucracy was a beast that devoured good intentions. "Sir?" The duty officer interrupted his memories. "Should we scramble and intercept aircraft?" Blake looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "No, Lieutenant. We wait. Have you ever witnessed someone step into a role they weren't officially allowed to have and prove they belonged there all along? Share their story?" Grid Sector 6 Bravo was 12 miles northwest of the base. Flash flood zone created by a dam failure upstream. Dangerous crosswinds funneling through mountain valleys. The kind of flying conditions that separated real pilots from people who just thought they could fly. Casey pushed the Griffin HX-9 through weather that would have grounded lesser aircraft. Rain hammering the windscreen like machine gun fire. Wind shear that could flip a helicopter upside down in seconds. Lightning crackling between mountain peaks close enough to fry electronic systems. She flew through it all like she'd been born in a cockpit. Griffin 7-7 Alpha. This is Granite Ridge Command. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge. Casey switched off the command frequency and tuned to emergency rescue. Any call sign? Any call sign? This is Griffin Rescue inbound to your position. Please respond. A weak voice crackled through static. Griffin Rescue. This is Sergeant Martinez. We're on the roof of our Humvee. Water rising fast. Can't hold on much longer. Casey crested the final ridge and saw the disaster below. 4 soldiers clinging to the roof of a camouflaged Humvee completely surrounded by churning brown water. The current was vicious, probably moving at 15 miles per hour. Trees and debris racing past like deadly missiles. The vehicle was sinking slowly but steadily into the flood. The landing zone was impossible. Power lines on 3 sides, trees on the 4th, maybe 20 feet of clearance in any direction. The kind of approach that killed overconfident pilots. This was exactly why they wouldn't let her fly these missions. Too dangerous. Too precise. Too much liability if something went wrong. Casey dropped the Griffin HX-9 into a hover exactly 6 feet above the raging water. Rotor wash creating a hurricane of spray and noise. The helicopter bucking and fighting against mountain winds that wanted to slam it into the power lines. She deployed the rescue cable and grabbed the loudspeaker microphone. Listen carefully, one at a time. Secure the harness around your chest. I've got you. The first soldier looked up through the spray and chaos, and couldn't believe what he saw through the helicopter's windscreen. The pilot was a woman, Asian features, completely calm despite flying in conditions that would terrify most men. Who are you? He shouted over the rotor noise as she lifted him towards safety. Casey's voice came back steady as stone. I'm the one who doesn't leave soldiers behind. One by one she pulled them from certain death. Professional, methodical, flawless. The second soldier was hypothermic and barely conscious. The third had a broken arm from debris impact. The fourth was Sergeant Martinez himself, the squad leader who'd been keeping his men alive through sheer force of will. As she lifted the final soldier, the Humvee gave a metallic groan and disappeared completely beneath the surface. 30 seconds later, and they all would have died. The flight back to Granite Ridge took exactly 47 minutes of perfect aviation. Casey navigated around thunderstorms, maintained precise altitude through severe turbulence, and kept 4 rescued soldiers alive with nothing but skill and determination that had been ignored for 7 years. When the Griffin HX-9 appeared on the horizon, every person on the base was watching. Officers lined the tarmac like spectators at an air show. Maintenance crews had stopped working entirely. Even the administrative staff had come outside. The base commander stood with his arms crossed, preparing to end someone's career. Casey brought the helicopter down in a textbook landing, soft as a feather touching silk. The rescue was flawless. The soldiers were safe. The mission was complete. She shut down both engines and stepped out onto the concrete. Complete silence. Then General Blake walked forward through the crowd. Officers automatically stepped aside. Everyone on the base knew that 3 stars on a collar meant career-defining moments were about to happen. Blake stopped exactly 3 feet from Casey. He slowly removed his cap, revealing silver hair and eyes that held memories of war, and saluted. "Greetings, Pilot 17, he said, his voice carrying across the silent tarmac like a gunshot. The person I once owed my life to." Casey's eyes widened as recognition dawned. She remembered this face from old photographs in her father's study. "General Blake? Your father saved my life 7 years ago, Lieutenant. He disobeyed direct orders to do it. He died 2 weeks later, following the same type of intelligence failure that nearly killed me that day." Blake's voice carried the weight of guilt that had been crushing him for years. "I failed him. I failed you. I let bureaucracy and politics keep you from the cockpit where you belong. That ends right now. Sometimes people don't need to be given permission. They just need an opportunity. Are you overlooking someone with that kind of potential?" 1 week later, Casey received orders to report to the base Heritage Hall at 1,400 hours sharp. She'd walked past the building countless times but never entered. Heritage Hall was reserved for ceremonies, distinguished visitors, and moments that define military careers. The walls held decades of Air Force history. General Blake was waiting inside, standing beneath portraits of legendary pilots. "Come in, Lieutenant Min." The main hall was lined with photographs of aviators who'd served with exceptional distinction, heroes who'd pushed the boundaries of flight, warriors who'd made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country. In the center of the wall, a new photograph had been mounted in a place of honor. Lieutenant Colonel Hai Min in his dress uniform, eyes bright with the confidence of a man who knew his purpose. Below the photograph, a brass plaque bore an inscription that made Casey's throat tighten. "Who trained the successor we failed to recognize?" "I had this commission," Blake said softly. "Your father's service record deserved better recognition than a file folder in some Pentagon basement. But more importantly, his training methods deserve to be continued." He handed Casey a small velvet presentation case. Inside was a silver patch unlike anything she'd ever seen. Griffin HX-9 designation, but with additional markings that indicated something special. Griffin Silver, Blake explained, only awarded to pilots who've completed Level 5 risk rescues under combat conditions. There are exactly 11 of these patches in existence worldwide. Casey ran her fingers over the intricate embroidery, silver thread depicting a griffin in flight, wings spread over storm clouds. Sir, I was just doing what needed to be done. No, Lieutenant, you were doing what everyone else was afraid to do. When the system failed, when protocol became an obstacle instead of guidance, when courage was the only qualification that mattered, you stepped forward. Blake walked to the tall windows overlooking the flight line where 3 Griffin HX-9 helicopters sat ready for duty. You know what your father taught me during the short time I knew him. The best pilots aren't necessarily the ones who follow every regulation to the letter. They're the ones who understand why regulations exist and possess the judgment to know when something more important takes precedence. Casey pinned the Griffin's silver patch to her flight suit with hands that no longer shook with uncertainty. What happens now, sir? Now you fly, Lieutenant. You train the next generation of pilots. You show them what it truly means to be qualified for this responsibility, not just certified on paper. Blake turned back to face her with a smile that erased years of regret. And Casey, no one on this base calls you maintenance anymore. You're Pilot 17. You represent everything the Griffin HX-9 program was created to accomplish. If you believe that sometimes all it takes is someone brave enough to take the controls when others hesitate, subscribe. Every story is a journey beyond artificial limitations. Military instructors always say rank doesn't fly helicopters. Real pilots do. And on the day when protocol